it's Linda from Lányos Handmade, and today we're going to do part 2 of the Gemma Bag sew along, and we're going to put in the slip pocket, which is this right here, and we're going to do the gusset for the drop-in lining, which is what this is. And also next week I'm going to do this slip pocket. Can also have card slots on it, so I'll have the card slots show you how to do that if you want that instead. And what else? Oh yeah, pay special attention to the notes, because I made some notes about how wide the seam allowance has to be on the on the gusset. So take a look at the notes too before you sew. Now I did cut that really long piece that I had in half, and to follow the instructions that are in the pattern, I'm going to sew these two pieces together with just 1/4 of an inch of a seam allowance. And I'm going to make a little pocket that goes on the front of our bag lining. I know I pin all the way around here, but what I am going to do is I'm going to leave about 2 inches open down here, so that I can turn it. So I'm going to sew just around here, and I'll zigzag again too. Then I'll turn it, poke out the corners, press it, and then we can sew it on here. So here we have it. I find zigzagging crushes the edges down, so sometimes when you have really thick interfacings, it helps crush it down. And it also is like a basting stitch to hold everything while you do your nice stitch all the way around. So now we've got this opening and we can pull everything through. I've got a really heavy fabric here, and I'm going to go press it really well, and hopefully it will almost melt together because it's very thick. At least the opening is big enough so I can stick my hand in, and then get this little pokey thing here and poke out the corners and go press it. So now that this is nicely pressed, I need to sew this opening shut, and I usually like to top stitch all around, and that's how I want to sew this opening shut. Hopefully it catches the edges. If it doesn't, I think I'm going to have to hand sew just a little bit to make sure, but we can check on that later. I got the wrong color thread in, so I'm going to change my thread. Oh yes, sorry about the band-aid. I banged my fingernail between 2 pieces of wood, and the fingernail is turning blue, so hopefully it doesn't get any worse than that. So let's sew this top stitch around, I think really close, probably 1/8 of an inch to the edge. There, now we've sewn our pocket shut, and we've sewn all the way around to help flatten it out and hold it, and it's been pressed. And I've already marked the lines, but I will show you here. This is 1.5 inch in on each side. There. And this one. And this is 2 inches down from the top. Now, if you want it lower down, you can do that. Just keep in mind, you've got a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I kind of like it when you open the bag, the pocket's right there. So that's why I usually stick mine a bit high. Then you center this right between the marks, if you can see them. And you can use a double-sided tape to hold it down, or some pins. And I usually like to stick some Wonder Tape, double-sided tape, on these edges here. And then I'll sew with a little box around and another box. And that'll stick my slip pocket on. And then the front piece will be finished. So we'll have the front piece of the lining and the back piece of the lining all done. And we can go on to the gusset. There you go. I've got the pocket on, ready to go. This is my front piece of my lining. I sewed right on top of what I'd sewed before, and I stuck these little triangles here at the top. I started here, went up, went across, and went down. And then I went up, across and down. So there's a little bit of a triangle there anchoring it down. That's my front, and this is going to be the back of my lining, and it's all ready to go. So now we just need to put them together with the gusset. So I'll get my gusset pieces out so I can sew these two together. Now here's my gusset piece. It's really long, and I'm going to center the center of the gusset with the center of the bottom of the bag. And I'm going to start from here so I can fit it all the way through. This is sort of a cheater's way to stick on a gusset, because you don't have to have it fit perfectly, because there is enough on the ends to make it work. So I'm going to sew it probably at 5/8 inch, because I like to make my seam allowances on my lining a bit smaller. Whoa, hold on there, I mean a bit bigger, not smaller. And like I said, I'm going to start from this center. So I'll be pinning it this way. And around here, I'm going to clip this just a little bit, just so we can get it around the corners. You see how when that's clipped, it fits better around the corner? We're going to make it as minimalistic as possible. We don't want to lose too much of that. Now you can make a square cornered bag, but I've always sewed rounded corners on this, and you know, just a slight round. I like it that way. It's up to you. You're the designer of this bag. It helps after. See, I flatten this down, and I pin it that way too. So when I'm sewing around this, I'm going to go around there. If it helps to see the curve there. Then when you're sewing, you know it's 5/8 all the way around here. And then we'll go up to the top. I like to pin all of it first, because then if I find that I've made, you know, some error in cutting the pieces, I haven't sewed half of it on and then found out it doesn't really fit. And then we'll do the same coming this way. And if yours ends up on either side being a bit longer, it just means that your curve is a different size than mine, which is fine. And remember that when you've got another pattern, if you're making a gusset for it, you can always cut these pieces, you know, maybe another inch longer, and then it'll fit. And you can take the extra off afterwards. Maybe the extra will be an inch. You haven't lost anything. Maybe it'll be 1 1/4 inches. So I'm going to just sew around it now. So I've sewn the gusset on. And next we can sew on the other side. I do like to cut these down to about half. And then I'm going to zigzag it before I finish this off. So I'll zigzag it around, and then I can sew on the other piece exactly the same way. I'll make sure I line up the center bottoms, and I'll make sure that I do a 5/8 seam allowance here, because I want this lining bag to be smaller than the outer part of the bag. And we'll do the exact same thing on the rounded corners. It's a little bit more awkward when you've got this bag attached. but we'll get it pinned together and clipped. So it's pinned on right now. I've got the corners folded back out of the way. I'm going to do 5/8 of an inch around so that the lining is a little bit smaller. And then after, I'm going to trim it, and I'm going to zigzag it again. I haven't zigzagged this yet, but it's trimmed. And we should follow along here and cut down the corners just a bit. Make them more rounded too. Oh, there's a pin in there I'm going to run over. Now, the other thing about doing the lining a little bit smaller, which I might not have mentioned before, is although it's nice to do 5/8 here, you really should move up to 1/2 up here at the top, because you want this part of your bag, the mouth of this bag, to be the same size as the mouth of your outer bag. So I might not have mentioned that when we sewed on the first side. So I guess I'll just start sewing this. I do like to put it down like this so I could see. And if you're worried it's not going to fit on, you can always sew from here to there and from here to there. And then that way the excess will fall off the end here.
Well, what do you know? He knows he's not allowed in this room, and yet he still sneaks in, and he keeps on trying. Look at his eyes are open, just waiting for me to move them.
Well, well, well. You missed the excitement. I ran out of bobbins, so I turned the camera off and reached for my coffee and dumped my coffee on my sewing mat. So I had to take everything off and got to do laundry soon. And put everything back on again and set up my camera and went to zigzag around the edges and realized I still didn't have a bobbin, so I sewed halfway around with no thread in it. So I changed my thread, and I realized I have only one spool of black thread, but I've got 4 of this beigey color. I don't know why. So I'm using the beige, hoping to use it up. And then after all that, everything's ready to go. So what can you do? So now back to our bag. We've got everything sewn and zigzagged. We didn't leave an opening in the bottom because this is going to be a drop-in lining. And we have our zipper pocket done. And we have our slip pocket done. And we're going to put a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the top here. I like pressing it down actually so that it's a clear line of where the fold is. And we're going to slip that inside the outside of the bag and sew around the top. I really enjoy doing this part because I like to look at all the pretty fabrics that the outside of the bag is going to have.
Now that's the end of part 2 of the Gemma Bag Sew Along. Thank you for watching, and stay in touch. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and I look forward to seeing you for part 3.